The Walking Dead premiered on October 31st, 2010 and ran for 11 seasons with 177 episodes. The hit TV show was so popular it even spawned 6 spin-off series. In today's video, I'm doing something extremely different from my regular character analysis videos, and instead, I'm going to be delving into the facts, theories and lore into one of the greatest TV shows ever made. So strap in as we investigate the Walking Dead iceberg. Now, before we start, I've divided this iceberg into 3 layers. Layer 1 is surface level facts and theories that some people might have heard of. Layer 2 is where we start to descend into the more obscure knowledge. And finally, we have the gloomy depths of Layer 3, which is very obscure and extremely cool knowledge. Now, a quick disclaimer, I have left off some really well-known theories just because they have already been covered extensively, such as the PPP card, the helicopters within the show, and who Judith's real father is. Right, without further ado, let's delve into layer 1 of the iceberg. Dale saves Hershel. Dale dies in season 2 episode 11 titled Judge, Jury, Executioner. However, it was originally meant to be Hershel who died in this scene, as Dale was meant to live a lot longer. But after Frank Darabont fell out with the network AMC, the actor who plays Dale, named Jeffrey DeMunn, was no longer interested in continuing with the show, with the absence of Darabont, so he asked to be killed off, which subsequently meant that Hershel was kept alive for 2 whole seasons longer than he was supposed to be. And I personally much prefer the character of Hershel, so in my opinion this was a blessing in disguise. But it does make you think, how was Dale supposed to be killed off? Would he have been given Hershel's death in the show, or been given his comic book death, which ended up being given to Bob? Either way, I guess we will never know the original plans for the character of Dale. The Pike deaths. In season 9 episode 15 titled The Calm Before, the infamous Pike deaths happened, as the Whisperers cemented themselves as one of the most cruel and violent villain groups in the whole show. However, if you take the first initials of all of the Pike victims in order, it spells the Art of Death. Those characters being from left to right: Alec, Rodney, Tammy, Ozzy, Frankie, DJ, Enid, Addie, Tara, and finally Henry. It's an extremely cool Easter egg and is a rather poetic way for these characters to bow out of the show. However, I do kind of find it hard to believe that Alpha knew the names of all of these people despite not living in the community, but still, it's very cool writing and a very good Easter egg. Jeffrey Dean Morgan's son is a walker. Did you know that Jeffrey Dean Morgan's son named Gus is a huge fan of the show? So much so that he appears as a walker in the episode Out of the Ashes in season 11, as he attempts to bite the hand of some kids playing around in Alexandria before Judith intervenes. I'll put some pictures on screen now, but this is a very niche fact which I only found out recently, and I think it's so awesome that Gus was able to briefly appear in the show, in which his father is such a big star, and also very cool of his dad to get him involved in the show he loves so much. Travis Manawa. Travis Manawa, portrayed by Cliff Curtis, was an extremely well written and fan favourite character from the early seasons of Fear the Walking Dead, which is a Walking Dead spin-off show. However, the writers were forced to write him out due to Cliff Curtis signing a 3-year movie deal with Avatar. In the episode New Frontier, Travis is shot in a helicopter by Tucker and his men, and he is shot in the stomach and the neck and proceeds to jump out of the low-flying helicopter. And this is the last we ever see from this character. However, a pretty sizable number of fans don't actually believe the character is dead. Although I am firmly on the side of him being actually dead, many people argue that Rick and other characters who are shown within the main show survive helicopter crashes all the time. Plus, we never see Travis's body. They also argue that Troy Otto can survive what happened to him, so why can't Travis? Either way, it's a mystery to this day, and I don't think we will ever get an answer to the whereabouts of Travis. Is he a walker, or is he still out there? Rosie Porter. Eugene Porter goes through his ups and downs within the series, from changing sides to saving Rick and Co in the Savior War, but in the end, the character does get a happy ending. In the last episode of season 11, we see Eugene and Max have had a child named Rosie, who is named after Eugene's close friend Rosita. However, the baby is played by Kerry Payton, who plays King Ezekiel's real-life daughter. Now, I'm really starting to notice a theme of actors getting their children involved in the Walking Dead universe, but as Eugene lifts up his baby to the camera, King Ezekiel is actually doing a speech in front of a crowd about the future of the children in the Commonwealth. Could this possibly be a hint to the fact that his real life child is in this scene? Rick and Daryl. Now, we all know that in the show, Rick and Daryl develop a brotherly-like bond, and the actors who portray these characters, Norman Reedus and Andrew Lincoln, also struck up quite the friendship on the show. Norman famously pranked Andrew in an interview by getting him to ask where the toilet is in Japanese, whilst telling him it meant "thank you for having me." Also, for scenes that Andrew Lincoln had to smile in within the show, Norman Reedus would often hide just out of shot and tickle his feet to make him smile and laugh in these scenes. And Norman even has the beard that Andrew Lincoln wore in the early seasons of the show in his fridge at home. References. The Walking Dead has referenced several other TV shows and media franchises throughout its 11 seasons. For example, when Rick wakes up from his coma in Atlanta, he looks at the clock in the hospital room and the clock reads 2:17, which is a nod to the infamous Stephen King novel The Shining, as it pays homage to the most haunted room in the hotel, that being room 217. And that's not the only Stephen King reference in the whole show, as in season 4 episode 9, Carl walks into a room and the Stephen King book The Stand can be seen on the bookshelf in the background. Another popular media that is often hidden in plain sight within many episodes is Invincible, as if you didn't know, Robert Kirkman, the creator of The Walking Dead, also created Invincible. And Stephen Yeun, who plays Glenn in The Walking Dead, is even the voice actor for Mark in Invincible. But the Easter eggs include comic appearances in the show, action figure appearances, and even in Invincible Season 2, the main character Mark gets transported to the Walking Dead universe momentarily. I just think it's awesome that the creator of both comics and the shows, Robert Kirkman, gives fans subtle hints in either show. It's a very nice touch. But another show that is frequently referenced in the early seasons of The Walking Dead is Breaking Bad. Kirkman says he made hints to the show as he is close friends with Vince Gilligan, the creator of Breaking Bad. First off, the car that Glenn takes from Atlanta in season 1 of the show is the same car which Walter buys his wife. Secondly, Merle Dixon, who's Daryl's brother, can also be seen with a bag of blue crystal meth, which is infamously made by Walter White. And many fans believe when Daryl talks about a quote, "janky little white guy," that he is referring to Jesse from the show. Either way, it's a very cool nod to the show, and some fans even think that the two shows take place in the same universe. Title name drop. The title of the show has only been said by 2 characters, Rick Grimes in his iconic season 5 Barn speech, and lastly Daryl Dixon in the last episode of the entire show. And I can't think of 2 more fitting characters to name drop the title. The Puzzle. Now, we all know the story of Carol's real daughter, Sophia. She gets chased by walkers into the forest and goes missing, and this is how Rick and the group stumble upon Hershel's farm. And they eventually find out that she has turned into a walker and was being kept in Hershel's barn. However, in season 4, the episode The Grove, when Carol is confessing to Tyrese about killing Karen and David, they are building a puzzle on the table. And if that puzzle was to be completed, it would actually make this exact picture of Sophia. And I mean, this is such a cool little Easter egg, and the puzzle fact was actually confirmed in an interview with Melissa McBride, who's the actress who plays Carol. Rick's jeans. During the governor's attack on the prison, Rick is shot in the leg and gets pretty badly beaten up by the governor. However, he is saved by Michonne, who stabs the governor in the chest with her katana. But did you know that the bullet hole in Rick's jeans stays there for the remainder of the show? I'll put some images on screen now, but on his left leg, right on his thigh, you can see the bullet hole in his trousers, which is a wild detail, and it remains over the course of 6 seasons. I mean, the attention to detail here is phenomenal. That being said, does this mean that Rick has wore the same pair of trousers for the entirety of the apocalypse? And if so, I really hope he's washed them. Shane and Randall. Randall is a minor but pivotal character in The Walking Dead Season 2. As a member of an unnamed hostile group, his character plays a key role in exploring the moral dilemmas faced by Rick Grimes and his group, as they argue whether or not to kill the young man. And funnily enough, the person who wants to kill him the most is Shane. However, did you know the actor who plays Shane, John Bernthal, and Randall's actor, Michael Zegan, actually went to the same college? And John was actually the one who recommended that Michael try out for the role of Randall. And funnily enough, even though John Bernthal's character is 15 years or so older than Randall's character in the show, there is only a 2-year age difference between the 2 real-life actors. Oceanside. Oceanside is a community that got introduced into the show in season 6, however they never really play a big role within the story, as they always felt a bit pointless. However, they seemingly vanish in season 11, and they are never shown on the screen again. However, this point is extremely anticlimactic, as there is a very simple explanation to why this happens. The audience was meant to get closure for this storyline. Multiple scenes showing Oceanside alive and well were written into the season 11 script, however they were later removed due to problems during production, meaning that the audience never saw these scenes in the final cut, which is why the fan theories of Oceanside being killed by or abducted by other groups just aren't true. And in reality, the reason Oceanside just vanishes is very anticlimactic. Rosita's death. Rosita is introduced to us in season 4 alongside Abraham Ford and Eugene Porter as they travel to Washington DC, believing that Eugene has a cure for the zombie apocalypse. At first, Rosita's role is a primarily supportive one. As she follows Abraham's mission, she is a tough and capable survivor, but initially much of her story revolves around her relationship with Abraham. However, the character starts to slowly gain a bigger role within the show, and by the final season, Rosita plays a significant role in the struggle against the Commonwealth. She remains as one of the core fighters who is fiercely loyal to the group and to her daughter Coco. By the end of the series, Rosita is gravely injured while rescuing Coco from a herd of walkers and is bit. In one of the show's most emotional moments, she succumbs to her injuries after sharing a heartfelt goodbye with her friends and loved ones. However, Rosita was never actually meant to be killed off. The writers originally planned for her to live, but after Rosita's actress, Christian Serratos, requested her to be killed off, as she thought it would make the final episode more emotional and also make more sense from a story point of view for a major character to die. And she's absolutely right. Just imagine in the last episode if Rosita didn't die. I mean, we wouldn't have had a major character death other than villains since like Jesus or Tara in season 9 of the show, which now looking back makes you realise they really didn't kill anyone of note in the later seasons of the show. But as much as I loved Rosita, I think it was a really good move killing her off for the final episode, just to make it that bit more emotional. Greg Nicotero. Greg Nicotero is a horror legend and the special effects creator for The Walking Dead. He is the person that brings the walkers to life and makes them so creepy. And he also appears frequently throughout the show as a walker and has been killed by Andrea alone on 3 separate occasions. Carl's haircut. After the death of Carl's mother Laurie, who tragically dies giving birth to Judith at the prison, he vows to never get his hair cut again, in order to honour his mother, as she was always the one who would cut his hair for him. Another reason for Carl's long hair is that Scott Gimple asked Chandler Riggs, who's the actor who plays Carl, to grow it out in preparation for season 6, where Carl was due to lose his eye, and this would be a way to cover the bandage. And whilst we're on the topic of Chandler Riggs, did you know that he actually appears in season 11 of The Walking Dead, despite his character being killed off in season 8? He appears as a farmer in the background. As Chandler was passing by, he stopped in to say hello to the cast as they were shooting. The production team offered him an appearance as a farmer in the background as an extra, to which Chandler Riggs obliged. And the pictures you're seeing now are the pictures of Chandler Riggs on set in season 11. The CRM. The CRM stands for the Civic Republic Military, which is the military army of the Civic Republic, one of, if not the most, advanced societies to emerge after the zombie apocalypse. The CRM seeks to rebuild human civilization, but they are extremely pragmatic and offer a ruthless approach. They prioritize the greater good above individual lives, even if that means sacrificing whole communities. The CRM is rumored to have taken control of Philadelphia just 1 month into the apocalypse, housing a population of 200,000. This means in Dead City, if Maggie and Negan had decided to head through Philadelphia to get to New York, they most likely would have either been killed or captured by the CRM, which could have been a very nice segue from Dead City to The Ones Who Live. But then again, I'm not even sure if the timelines would even match up due to Dead City taking place between 3 and 5 years after season 11. Okay, so that wraps up our surface level facts. It's now time to move deeper into the depths of the Walking Dead media and move on to layer 2. The orange backpack. The orange backpack is an item that consistently pops up within the show, so I will first go over the story of this item, and then I will talk about what I believe the meaning of it is. This backpack first appears in Season 3, Episode 12, titled Clear. As Rick, Michonne and Carl drive to look for guns, they eventually find Morgan. However, on their way there, a man tries to wave them down for help with an orange backpack. However, they all ignore him and speed past. However, after returning back to the prison just a few hours later, they find the man has been devoured by the dead, and the only thing left of him is his orange backpack. Rick pulls over, chucks the orange backpack in the boot, and returns back to the prison. After this incident, it then becomes Glenn's backpack, and then it ends up with Daryl after Glenn's death. But it eventually ends up with Carl for a bit before the last time we see the backpack is when Michonne gifts it to Virgil at Oceanside. So for a long time, fans believed that the backpack represented death, and whoever wore it was destined to die at some point in the show. However, now the series is over, we can disprove this theory, as neither Daryl or Virgil die, and they were both owners of the orange backpack. What I believe is the backpack symbolises hope and a second chance for an individual. After the brutal way in which the item was found, it ends up in the hands of Glenn, one of the most moral and kind individuals we see throughout the whole show. And after his death, it ends up with Daryl, who has grown throughout the apocalypse and become a kinder individual, which we see demonstrated by the fact that he lets Dwight go and lets him have a second chance at life despite being tortured by him. And then there's Carl, who was there on the day of the hitchhiker and saw firsthand what not helping can do in this world. And it's a full circle moment as he uses the very backpack of the guy he failed to save to carry supplies to help Sadiq at the gas station. And then finally there's Virgil. He starts off as a guy who's driven by the loss of his family and is consumed by this and turns crazy. He drugs Michonne on Bloodsworth Island. And what does Michonne hallucinate whilst drugged? That's right, the orange backpack. She envisions herself as the hitchhiker, which shows us she is feeling immensely guilty about the situation and what happened that day. However, after getting free and getting back, Virgil actually changes whilst in possession of this backpack. He becomes more stable and he actually saves Connie's life, showing that everyone can change. And I think this orange backpack symbolises this. And I think it represents hope and the light at the end of the tunnel, as everyone who owned this backpack evolved in some shape or form. Human history. This is the theory that The Walking Dead represents a repeat of human history in various ways, particularly in its depiction of the collapse of society and the struggle to rebuild. The show mirrors historical patterns of human behaviour when faced with chaos, survival, and the need for social order. First is the tribalism period. As a larger government fails, communities in The Walking Dead become isolated and self-reliant. Just like ancient or medieval tribes, people form tight-knit groups where loyalty is to one owns community rather than a nation or a larger political entity. Then leaders emerge as rulers over the smaller communities. Groups like the Kingdom, under Ezekiel, Oceanside and Hilltop reflect medieval civilizations, where power is decentralized and communities are run by lords or rulers. These societies often barter resources and engage in trades or warfare, much like medieval states. And finally, violence and conquest. The cycle of violence in The Walking Dead mirrors historical cycles of war and conquest. As groups seek for territory and resources, conflicts arise just like throughout human history. This is a prime example of the Roman conquest. Groups like the Saviors led by Negan, the Governor, and even the CRM represent the rise of leaders who seek to dominate others through violence and oppression. I mean, the virus itself can be seen as a metaphor for historical pandemics like the Black Plague or even the Spanish flu, which decimated human populations and created a sense of fear, chaos, and a breakdown of social order. This theory suggests that no matter what state the world is in, if you strip things back down to the basics, humans will always repeat the course of history, as it is deep-rooted within human instinct to lust for power and control. Norman Reedus. Okay, so after those last 2 points, this one is a bit more light-hearted. Did you know that Daryl Dixon was originally meant to ride a horse? However, Norman Reedus was scared of horses, so they changed it for a motorbike. Also, during a Walker Stalker convention, did you know a fan actually bit Norman Reedus out of excitement? I mean, that's a pretty strange reaction to meeting your idol, but Norman saw the funny side and didn't press charges against the fan, and even took a photo with them. Akaido. Aikido is a Japanese martial art that emphasizes blending with an attacker's motion to redirect their force and achieve a peaceful resolution. This is what Eastman teaches to Morgan in season 6 of the main show. But did you know that the book that Eastman gifts to Morgan appears in 2 separate spin-off shows? First, it appears in Fear the Walking Dead, when Morgan gifts the book to Nick and then Alicia after Nick passes away. And it also makes an appearance as Sergeant Okafor owns a copy of the same book in The Ones Who Live. I just thought this was a very neat little item that appears in multiple different spin-off shows. Whilst we are talking about Aikido, did you also know that Eastman's t-shirt whilst training Morgan is a reference to the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles? His t-shirt reads "Save the Terrapins," and if you didn't know, the creator of the Ninja Turtles was named Kevin Eastman, so this is almost certainly a deliberate Easter egg. AMC spoilers. For this next point, my good friend and fellow YouTuber Ty Swell is going to talk you through it. And I'm sure many of you will be very familiar with his content, but his link will be at the very top of this video's description, so make sure you check him out after finishing up with this video.
Hey folks, huge thanks to Theo for letting me talk on his channel. Now, there's actually quite a few examples of AMC and The Walking Dead spoiling their own show, and I'm not just talking about the 3 characters they straight up announced would be leaving. The first example I have comes in Season 2. One of the biggest conflicts in the series at that time was Shane's descent into villainy, and fans were extremely curious to see if the character was going to make it out of the season or not, as he had already outlasted his comic counterpart by a large margin. Well, unfortunately, as covered by many news outlets including The Hollywood Reporter at that time, those looking to pre-order The Walking Dead Season 2 limited edition Blu-ray set on the official AMC website back in March 2010 would have been greeted to a line in the description that mentioned one of its bonus features included a look into Shane's final episode, nearly 2 weeks before the airing of Better Angels, effectively spoiling the second season's biggest death. The next example I have comes at the Season 5 mid-season finale with the loss of Beth Green. Some of you may not be aware of this, but new episodes did not air live simultaneously across the world, with some places receiving them up to an entire day later from its initial broadcast. But whoever was running The Walking Dead's Facebook page following the episode Coda's East Coast US premiere was surely fired that night, as they tweeted out an image of Daryl holding Beth's cold body with the caption #RipBeth, spoiling the death for millions who hadn't yet seen the episode and happened to be scrolling through Facebook. And finally, this one's quite a bit more subtle, but in the Season 5B Surviving Together trailer, keen-eyed viewers had noticed a quick shot of Tyrese sprinting through the foggy woods. What was interesting about this, however, was the length of his beard, which was significantly shorter than we last saw in 508. Some could have attributed this to the group's incoming arrival to Alexandria, but with every other character appearing just as they had in the previous episode, it wasn't exactly a shock when he met his end in the mid-season premiere. I'm sure there are more instances of AMC and The Walking Dead spoiling themselves, but these are some of the most interesting in my opinion. So if you have any other examples, definitely leave them in the comments down below. And thanks again to Theo for putting this iceberg together.
Carol's children. Carol Peltier is an extreme badass. She was almost built for this post-apocalyptic world. She is very talented at a lot of things, but one of those things, unfortunately, is not keeping her children alive. It's become a bit of a joke amongst the fanbase, the fact that every child she seems to look after ends up dead somehow. However, did you know that all 3 of the child actors she plays a motherly figure to within the show are siblings in real life? This is Sophia, who is played by Madison Lintz, the younger version of Henry, who is played by Maxon Lintz, and finally the older version of Henry, who is played by Matt Lintz. I'll put a picture on screen now of the 3 of them standing together, but the resemblance between them is crazy. But to me, it's just wild how they cast a family of young actors to kill them all off in the show. I guess it's the oldest sibling Matt who has the bragging rights though within the family, as his character lived the longest. The Whisperers in Season 3. This fan theory states that the Whisperers had been around as early as season 3, and the evidence we have to support this is Lizzie. Lizzie is a character who becomes infatuated by the Walkers and believes that they are still humans, and thinks if you kill people, as long as their brain isn't damaged, they will just come back like normal. But what if Lizzie wasn't crazy? What if she just misinterpreted what she saw? What if she encountered a horde of Whisperers and heard them speaking to one another, hence why she thought Walkers were still people? And that would also explain why she said that they spoke to her. Did she in fact come into contact with the Whisperers before arriving at the prison? Another and arguably more compelling reason for this theory is Morgan Jones. After the death of his son Dwayne, Morgan becomes crazy and dangerous and starts to lose his sanity as he struggles to battle with the reality of losing both his wife and his son to the apocalypse. And not only did he lose his wife, but she also was the one that killed Dwayne in a twisted turn of fate. So, how does this all link to the Whisperers? Well, when Rick and Michonne re-encounter Morgan in season 3 whilst out looking for supplies, Morgan Jones says this.
People wearing dead people's faces. Morgan, listen, no, I don't know you. You do know me.
Now, Morgan says in this clip, there were people wearing dead people's faces. Now, when the audience first saw this, we thought it was Morgan having one of his breakdowns, but what if it wasn't? What if he actually came into contact with the Whisperers whilst on his own and he had to escape the group? Now, you may be thinking, but the Whisperers were started by Alpha, who resided in Baltimore. How would she have ended up in Atlanta and coming into contact with Morgan? Well, season 3 is actually set just over a year into the apocalypse. And we know the Whisperers move with hordes of walkers, and we also know from tales of the Walking Dead that walkers like to migrate. So what if the horde that the Whisperers were in migrated to Atlanta, which is only about a 2-week walk away from Baltimore? So it's entirely possible that they could have walked to Atlanta in the time frame. And in doing so, did they in fact come into contact with Morgan? And this is the reason he says this when he sees Rick and Michonne in season 3. However, this theory, although it's a very cool concept, is basically impossible to have happened. So let's go over all the holes in this theory. First of all, in Tales we learn Hera was formerly the leader of the Whisperers before Alpha. And before Alpha was in charge, the Whisperers were actually a less hostile group, and they actually welcomed people in, as they were just normal people trying to survive. And we also know that Alpha met Beta sometime in 2014 before taking over the Whisperers, as Alpha kills Hera and turns the group hostile. But this timeline means that the Whisperers didn't actually turn hostile until around 2014, which puts us towards the end of season 5, basically meaning the timelines don't match up at all. Secondly, we never hear Morgan mention this again, so we can pretty safely assume that he wasn't referring to Whisperers in season 3 and he instead was just having a breakdown. And finally, the nail in the coffin for this theory is Robert Kirkman came out and basically confirmed that this theory isn't canon, as the Whisperers hadn't even been thought of in the comics in season 3, so every reference to them in the show from previous seasons is pure coincidence. Prop weapons. Did you know that every single weapon in the show is a prop except one, and that's Michonne's katana? This is a real katana and it is extremely sharp, so Denai Guerrera has to be very careful on set when wielding this weapon. The Tank Walker. When Frank Darabont was in charge of The Walking Dead, he planned to dedicate a whole episode to the infamous Tank Walker, played by Sam Witwer. This is the walker that Rick shoots and causes him to go death in the tank before Glenn saves him, right at the start in episode 1. But Frank Darabont's original plan was to show us the fall of Atlanta through the Tank Walker's perspective. He intended this to be season 2, episode 1, and the episode would have gone something like this. 7 soldiers would drop into the city via a helicopter and have maps with coordinates on where they would have to go. What would only be a reinforcement mission to secure the city would quickly turn into a sticky situation for the soldiers, as they would soon realise this is well and truly the end of the world. It would show the fall of the city gradually as supply lines and communications were cut off and their escape plans were also cut off. Frank had also planned for a scene with civilians planning to leave the city, where the soldiers were on a strict shoot to kill instructions, and as the soldiers mowed down crowds of civilians with machine guns, we see Andrea and her sister Amy in the crowd trying to leave. However, they are pulled to safety by Dale, which would explain the backstory of how these characters all met. However, the episode would end with only one of the 7 soldiers making it to their coordinates, and as he climbs into the tank, he realizes he's been bitten and he lays there defeated, just waiting to turn. I think this episode would have been really cool and it would have had a movie-like feel to it, and it's a huge shame we never got to see it, as it would have shown us the fall of Atlanta and given us a clearer picture of how the military got overrun by the dead. But that is the story of the tank walker. Variant walkers. Throughout the Walking Dead universe, we see many variant walkers. First off, we have the Frank Darabont era walkers, who were smarter, they could jog, they could climb fences, and they used tools such as rocks to break through windows. And then we have the lurkers. These walkers lay dormant until an unsuspecting victim comes across their path. Next we have the climbers, which we see in season 11 of the main show. They are called the climbers because they climb over the Commonwealth walls and attack the civilians. Next we have the radiant walkers, which appear in Fear the Walking Dead. These zombies are extremely dangerous, as just being around them can make you ill. They are filled with radiation, and killing them or even getting their blood on you can give you radiation poisoning. Next we have the burners, seen in the Daryl Dixon show. As the name suggests, touching these walkers burns you, and this is because they have acidic blood. However, they don't really pose that much of a threat from a distance. The Walker King is the walker that Maggie comes across in Dead City, which is a bunch of walkers fused together like a rat king in the real world. The fused walkers come together to make one massive being, and it is extremely dangerous. And finally, there is the man-made hybrid walkers. These walkers have extreme speed, extreme strength, and extreme aggression, and even feast on other walkers, making them possibly the most dangerous type of walker to encounter out of any. The hospital. In the pilot episode of The Walking Dead, many people wondered how Rick survived in his coma for 59 days with no medical attention. However, he actually had someone looking after him for the majority of the time. Her name was Dr. Gail McCones, and in a webisode, The Oath, it takes place at the Harrison Memorial Hospital, which is the same place Rick is located. The story centers around a young couple who end up in the hospital looking for medical supplies. However, they find Dr. Gail McCones. I won't ruin the whole webisode for you all because you can check it out for free on YouTube and some people might not have watched it. But essentially, this nurse was taking care of the last few patients she had right up until the very end. So this is how Rick survived all of the time until he woke up. Lucille. Negan Smith's infamous baseball bat covered in barbed wire is one of the most iconic weapons in the entire show. Nicknamed Lucille, it strikes fear into many. But in season 6, episode 15, titled East, one of the guns Carl picks up from the armory has an image of Lucille carved into the handle. This is foreshadowing the eventual introduction of Negan just 9 episodes later. However, some fans even speculate that Negan Easter eggs were being dropped as early as season 4, as when Beth comes across a pile of dead walkers on the ground. In the background, there is a baseball bat seemingly covered in barbed wire. Could this have been Negan's, or is this just a coincidence? Personally, I think it's a bit of a stretch. However, it definitely does strike a lot of resemblance to Lucille. But then again, in a zombie apocalypse, there's probably a lot more than one baseball bat wrapped in barbed wire. Tyrese's voice. After Tyrese is bit whilst exploring Noah's house, he is unexpectedly bit by Noah's infected little brother. Noah puts down his former brother, but the damage has already been done, and Tyrese sits on the floor bleeding out. In his head, he hears a British voice, talking about the downfall of society. But this voice is actually Andrew Lincoln's real voice speaking in his native British accent, which is a cool little Easter egg to fans that knew Andrew Lincoln's real voice. Okay, so that wraps up layer 2. It's now time to delve once again into the depths of layer 3 of the Walking Dead Iceberg. Tobias. Tobias is a character we meet in the first few episodes of season 1 in Fear the Walking Dead. Tobias was different though. He was way ahead of his time, as he predicts the end of the world and the collapse of society. He has been bringing supplies to his bunker since the first few cases of the outbreak. And although Madison initially looks at him as if he's crazy, she quickly realizes that Tobias knows what he's talking about. And he's really the first character we see across any Walking Dead show that truly understands the nature of the virus. However, this character just seemingly disappears, as many people wondered where he went. However, Dave Erickson came out in an interview during season 3 of Fear the Walking Dead, saying that the character did survive Operation Cobalt. So maybe Dave Erickson had plans to bring back the character in Fear, but after he got fired, these plans quickly died. However, in the recent spin-off show The Ones Who Live, Tobias' actor was seen on the set. However, he is not credited as appearing in the show. So perhaps they did plan to either show a cameo of Tobias or wrap up his storyline in the spin-off show. But then again, this doesn't happen. But this most likely does mean that Tobias has made his way to the Civic Republic, and we know at the absolute least this character is still alive, so he could be out there with his uncle that he mentions in Fear the Walking Dead episode 3. But at this point it's been 9 years since we last saw Tobias, so we will probably never get the answers to these questions unless they make a Tales of the Walking Dead episode about him. But Tobias is such a cool character who we at least know is alive somewhere out there. Famous walkers. The Walking Dead has a lot of famous fans, and some of them actually make sneaky appearances within the show. Former Pittsburgh Steelers receiver Hines Ward played a walker in season 3, appearing as a walker in Woodbury. Scott Ian would also go on to play a walker in season 5 of the show that is eventually killed by Carl Grimes. And finally, no other than Johnny Depp makes an appearance as a decapitated walker head in season 6. Until I did the research for this video, I genuinely had no idea that any of these cameos existed. Jeffrey Grimes. Jeffrey Grimes is the younger brother of comic book Rick Grimes and only appeared in a single issue titled The Alien. However, he is the same age as Laurie Grimes, and before the outbreak, him and Laurie were very good friends. He is the one that indirectly caused Rick and Laurie to meet. Jeffrey appeared to be friendly and a caring man who was often down on his luck. He seemed to have looked up to his older brother Rick, and Jeffrey always wanted to pay him back for all the times Rick was there for him, but he never got the chance. Seeing as we meet Jeffrey in the early days of the outbreak, he is very inexperienced with dealing with the undead. However, he still tries to remain brave and help a lady named Claudia to the dock to get back to America. However, he later saves Claudia's life from a walker, but at the cost of his own. Despite this, he states that it was the best day of his life as he got to meet Claudia, who he sees as his hero, and tells her to go and find Rick Grimes in America. Now, the reason I mention this is TV show Rick Grimes is unknown whether he has a brother or not. However, if he does, Jeffrey could be making an appearance in the universe very soon. See, Jeffrey Grimes lived in Spain, and with the Daryl Dixon show Book of Carol taking the characters to Spain, does this mean we will finally get to meet Jeffrey Grimes? It's an interesting fan theory, but it most likely will not happen due to a couple of factors. Number 1, Rick Grimes has never mentioned the fact he has a brother. And number 2, Jeffrey dies in the comics right at the start of the outbreak, so in order for Daryl to meet him in this current timeline, he would have had to outlast his comic book counterpart by around 12 years. However, saying this, it's not entirely out of the realm of possibility that this could happen, and with season 2 of the Daryl Dixon show airing right now, it's only a matter of time before we find out. Beta. We all know that Beta is a ruthless killing machine and a physically imposing giant, but did you know he is actually a famous country musician and has wore a mask since the very first day of the outbreak to hide his appearance? He was part of a band called Half Moon, and Negan's wife in the episode Here's Negan wears a Half Moon t-shirt. This is why we see Negan recognize Beta after killing him and finally demasking the giant. And this is the reason that Beta gets so mad at Alpha when they first meet, as she is humming and it reminds him of his past. And that's not the only Beta Easter egg we get. In season 5 episode 14 of Fear the Walking Dead, Daniel Salazar drops a bunch of records and one smashes, revealing a Half Moon album. And this record even has Beta's unmasked face on the front cover. However, the scene is very brief. The death of Beta's friend at the start of the outbreak is what causes him to become a recluse, and he slowly goes insane. The only other information we know about Beta pre-apocalypse is he was from Maryland, and at some point before the outbreak he killed a home invader and felt an immense amount of remorse after discovering that the invader had a Half Moon t-shirt on. But that's the interesting backstory of the not so friendly giant Beta. Dr. Edwin Jenner. Dr. Edwin Jenner is a character we meet in the last 2 episodes of season 1. He was hiding out in the CDC and he is named after the great Edwin Jenner from the 18th century who developed a vaccination for smallpox. When our group meet Dr. Jenner, he originally plans to incinerate everyone to cause a painless death as he has lost all hope in humanity. However, Rick persuades him to change his mind and Dr. Jenner does let the group out. However, himself and Jackie stay inside as they are incinerated instantly. Before leaving, Rick says how grateful he is to Dr. Jenner for letting them leave. However, Jenner responds, "The day will come when you won't be," which is famously the title of Season 7, Episode 1, where Negan kills Glenn and Abraham, but I'm sure you all already knew this. However, in a post-credit scene from World Beyond Season 2, we learn that Dr. Jenner was working on a cure to short-circuit the brain, and what he tells our group about France being the last to fall is an outright lie, as they were one of the first nations to fall, as the wildfire virus that started the outbreak actually originates from a French lab, more specifically from the Primrose and Violet team. One theory suggests that the French were actually close to a cure at one point, but messed up and indirectly led to variant walkers. Either way, Daryl Dixon's Season 2 will hopefully reveal more information about this and the origins of the disease, and reveal more about the Primrose and Violet team. But we do know that Dr. Jenner was in constant contact with this French lab and could have known more about the virus than he initially led on to our group. Set mishaps. During Rick's iconic Season 5 speech in Alexandria, Michonne was due to pistol whip him in the back of the head in order to stop the speech. However, did you know that Denai Guerrera accidentally really did hit Andrew Lincoln, causing the back of his head to bleed? However, she still carried out the scene, and out of all of the takes, they used the one that she actually hit him in because it was the best. Andrew Lincoln isn't faultless himself though, as he accidentally broke Jeffrey Dean Morgan's nose during the filming of Season 8. And then there's the worst moment in the show's history, which is the death of John Berkner. The stuntman fell 20 feet onto his head as he missed the mats and sadly died later in hospital. He was Dwight's stunt double, and Austin Amello stated it was the worst day of his life as he saw it unfold. May John Berkner rest in peace. The Red Machete. The machete with the red handle is one of the most iconic weapons in the whole Walking Dead. Rick uses this very weapon to brutally kill Gareth in the church. But did you know there is a whole backstory behind this weapon? So let's delve into the story of the Red Machete. We first see the Red Machete in the early days of the outbreak in the webisode Red Machete. It's located in a DIY store as a man tries to defend himself from a walker. He stabs it in the chest but is ultimately killed, and a girl called Mandy watches this event before her sister Alyssa and her father David catch up. After they take down the walker, they keep the machete, and this is where the weapon's journey starts. After this, David teaches Mandy how to use the weapon, but as the three go on a supply run for food, Alyssa is killed by a walker who grabs her by her hair. This is when David cuts Mandy's hair with the same machete and carves Mandy's name into the handle of the machete. Soon after, Mandy's father David is also bitten and dies, so now Mandy is left to fend for herself. After Mandy's house is broken into by looters, one of them, named Derek, takes the machete and wraps the weapon's handle in red tape, covering up Mandy's name engraved on the weapon. However, he is later killed by a walker, and the machete gets lodged inside the walker's chest. This is when we follow the journey of the walker for months, before it eventually gets killed by none other than the claimer Joe. And Joe actually uses this as his weapon of choice until we see Joe put the machete in the bag and pull out a gun. And the next scene is the infamous scene of the claimers attacking Rick, Carl and Michonne, eventually leading to Rick biting out Joe's throat. After the death of Joe, this is when Rick gets his hand on the weapon and he uses it for several weeks, even killing Gareth with it. However, after the group's arrival in Alexandria, the weapon is placed in the armory, and this is where it remains for around a season until the Saviors take all the weapons from Alexandria. A Savior named Gerald takes the machete, and he eventually decides to flee from the Saviors. However, shortly after, we see Gerald get shot off screen, and the machete gets lodged in the ground, where it stands for years. Until one day, none other than Mandy comes across the weapon. She picks it up, removing the tape, finding out it's the weapon that she owned right at the start of the outbreak. She removes the tape from the handle and heads towards her sister and father's grave. where she leaves the machete planted in the ground to honour her sister and father. However, right at the end of the webisode, we see the machete get picked up by an unseen person. So who picks up the machete? Well, some people believe that it was Lydia, who later hands the weapon to Alpha, as she can be seen wielding a machete in season 10. However, in my opinion, this is a bit far-fetched, as the machete she has doesn't really resemble this one at all. And plus, in her Tales episode, I reckon they would have given us the Easter egg of either her or Lydia taking it. So who do I think took the machete? Well, I'm not entirely sure, but I do think we will find out soon, as they are currently filming more Tales of the Walking Dead, which is essentially season 2 of Tales. And we all know that recently the Walking Dead universe has become a sucker for fan service. Rick cutting off his hand like in the comics, Troy coming back for season 8 of Fear. I reckon we will get an episode dedicated to the person that took this machete at the end of the webisode. However, that was the fascinating backstory to one of the most iconic weapons in the Walking Dead universe. Proctor John. Proctor John was the leader of a violent motorcycle gang pre-apocalypse who roamed around Southern California. We meet this character in season 3 of Fear the Walking Dead, and he is a villain who plans to run trade routes from Mexico to Texas. He is also the leader of the El Bazar trading post, and is a menacing and cruel man who will stop at nothing to get his way. After his plans of dominating trade routes from America to Mexico is ruined by a heroic Nick Clark who blows up a dam in order to save his family, whilst also dropping one of the hardest lines in the whole of Fear the Walking Dead, which I will play for you now.
I'm not negotiating, John. This is my suicide note.
But another fun fact about the dam explosion is it happened the exact same day as the CDC blew up in the main show. But anyway, back to Proctor John. Proctor John was due to be a big part of Fear's story as a villain. However, after the firing of Dave Erickson, this storyline was abandoned. However, if Fear's rebranding never happened, I reckon the character's storyline would have gone something like this. After the explosion of the dam, Proctor John and his men would rush away to safety quickly. However, they would have a new set goal of killing every single member of the Clark family for ruining their plans. Nick gets separated from Alicia and Madison due to the explosion, and we see Proctor John attempt to hunt down Nick first. However, after several close calls, the slippery and cunning Nick manages to evade capture, but instead of giving up, he now focuses his search to Madison and Alicia, who he eventually captures and uses them to lure Nick out. An intense standoff would ensue, however Nick would once again gain the upper hand due to Strand, Tucker and Crazy Dog, eventually killing the villain. However, before his death, I reckon Proctor John would kill someone very crucial in the story. I reckon this would either be Alicia or Tucker, as this would help to further develop Madison into the original villain role she was meant to play. And with Proctor John now gone, I think Madison would have now assumed all of his assets and become the new leader, eventually getting power hungry, which would further cause tension between Nick and his mother, resulting in Erickson's original plan of Nick eventually being forced to kill his own mother. However, the storyline I just suggested would happen over the course of a single season, that being season 4. Although this is me making an extremely rough prediction to what Proctor John's storyline could have looked like, it does make me sad to think of what Erickson's Fear could have become. There were so many stories left unfinished due to his departure, and Proctor John's is just one of these. And the actor who portrayed Proctor John, Ray McKinnon, did such a good job at making him feel so menacing and calculated, and having a season where a villain hunts down our characters would have made for some amazingly tense scenes. And it's such a shame that we never got to see the story of Proctor John play out. But with that being said, that brings an end to my Walking Dead Iceberg. I would like to say a huge thank you to Ty Swell for coming on the channel and helping me out with this video. And if you guys think I left anything off this iceberg, please do let me know down below in the comments. I made this video due to popular request and it took a lot of time and research, so that's why it's the only video that will be coming out this week. So please do like and subscribe if you enjoyed this. I would like to thank everyone who suggested points for this video on my community page, and to channel member Roderick Hare for his Dr. Jenner suggestion. But again, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Goodbye.